They whispered your name in rooms you never entered. They folded it into rituals crafted in the dark, where trembling hands etched symbols meant to bind you. Their envy was a blade sharpened against your silence, a weapon they believed would pierce the marrow of your spirit. You felt it, didn't you? The air thickening, the strange heaviness pressing against your chest at night, the sudden chill when no wind moved. You sensed the weight of curses crawling across your skin like spiders spun from their hatred. But what they failed to understand was simple. Curses are weak when spoken into the abyss, and you were born of that abyss. They prayed for your collapse, but they were praying into your shadow, and your shadow does not kneel. There is a theater inside your mind where their voices replay, accusations that were never spoken aloud. Desires to see you broken muttered like poisoned psalms. They thought distance would conceal them, that masks of civility would hide their venom. But curses are never silent. They carry the stench of desperation, the trembling fingerprints of those who cannot build, only destroy. And you, standing alone, felt their rituals like faint sparks against the night sky. They imagined themselves summoning storms. What they created was nothing more than a flicker, and the flicker died in the presence of your silence. Do you remember the first time you realized that what they sent toward you did not strike? It recoiled. They wished chains around your legs, but it was they who stumbled. They envisioned ruin gathering in your path, but it was their steps that fractured. Their curses did not carve into you. They bent back like brittle arrows, returning to pierce the hands that launched them. And you stood still, watching their fear grow in the cracks of their confidence. Because deep down they sensed it too. You were not the surface they thought you were. You were carved from something darker, something older, something that does not bend to their conjuring. It is not luck that shields you. It is not chance. It is law. The shadow you carry is not emptiness, it is gravity. A force older than envy, deeper than hate, heavier than their words. While they scatter themselves across rituals and fragments, you stand rooted in silence that cannot be touched. They mistook silence for weakness. They mistook restraint for fragility. They thought your refusal to strike meant you could not strike. And now they know better. For every curse they whisper, your shadow grows larger. For every ritual they burn, their own walls collapse. You are not the target they thought you could be. You are the mirror that returns every fragment of their venom until they drown in their own design. They tried curses, but curses bow where your shadow begins. And in that realization, the first fracture of their power was born. A curse never begins with thunder. It begins in silence, in the dark chamber of someone else's envy. Before it reaches you, it festers in their mind, an infection disguised as intention. They draw crooked symbols on scraps of paper, whisper your name like venom between their teeth, and believe the act of hating you is enough to fracture your path. A curse is not just a ritual, it is the architecture of obsession. They pour their weakness into it, hoping that weakness will somehow rewrite your destiny. And yet, what they create is never what they think. Every curse is built on scaffolding. A word sharpened into a weapon. A thought repeated until it carries weight. A ritual performed with trembling hands, convinced the darkness is listening. They take objects, hair, photographs, fragments of your existence, and twist them into symbols, hoping that through these shadows they can touch you. But here's the truth they never admit: curses are mirrors. The venom they mix is only as strong as the vessel that holds it. And when the vessel is cracked with insecurity, the poison spills back where it began. They thought they were aiming at you. They were only carving their own reflection deeper into the stone. You have felt it, haven't you? The sudden weight in the air, the invisible pressure that claws at your chest. That is the moment of impact, the strike of intention trying to lodge itself into your skin. But instead of piercing you, it fades like smoke, not because it lacks strength, but because your shadow does not yield. They are trying to ignite fire in a place where no oxygen exists. Their rage burns brightly in their own mind, but against you it suffocates, powerless in the void that surrounds you. A curse requires belief. It demands the target tremble, flinch, question themselves. Without your fear, the spell starves. Without your submission, it dies in silence. They do not know this. They chant, they carve, they spit their hatred into rituals, blind to the fact that the only one kneeling is themselves. You stand as the one untouched, not because you deflect, but because you absorb nothing. You offer no surface for their hatred to cling to. You are the blank wall against which their chaos collapses. Understand this: a curse is not a force of destiny. It is a confession of weakness, a confession of obsession, a confession that your existence unsettles them so deeply they must try to bind what they cannot touch. And in that admission lies their undoing. For while they believe they are striking at your life, they are only carving their own downfall. The anatomy of a curse is simple. It is a blade that cuts only the hand that wields it, and you, silent, unmoved, are the reason it breaks. They whispered your name in rooms you never entered. They folded scraps of paper with your likeness, burned candles down to ash, etched words designed to twist your path into ruin. And you felt it, the tightening in the air, the cold glance from shadows, the silence that pressed against your chest at night. For a moment, you wondered if the world itself had conspired against you. That fear was real. It crawled across your skin like unseen insects, telling you that someone out there wanted you to collapse. But then something broke, not in you, in them. The first time, it was subtle. You learned of their failure, their sudden misfortune. The ritual they crafted with such venom had not touched you, but it had turned inward, coiling like a serpent and striking its master. Their voice trembled when they spoke your name again, not with triumph, but with hesitation. They didn't understand what had happened, but you did. You felt it in the marrow of your bones. Curses are powerless against a presence carved from deeper shadows. You realized the truth in silence, watching as their steps faltered, as their schemes corroded. Where they thought they had struck you, they had only struck mirrors. The venom they spat did not poison you. It returned to their own tongue, bitter and unstoppable, and in that instant you stopped fearing. You saw that their rituals were not spells but desperate gestures, the flailing of those who lacked true dominion. Their hatred was not power. It was hunger. That was the fracture of fear. The exact moment when the chain snapped and you felt the weight of their malice crumble. What was meant to cage you became proof that you were untouchable. And in that moment you understood something most will never learn. The curse only binds the weak-hearted. To the one who walks with shadow as companion, curses bow, unable to pierce the armor of silence. They noticed it too. Their eyes shifted. Their voices dropped when you entered the room, because it is terrifying to curse someone and watch the curse dissolve into smoke, only to rise again as a storm that surrounds you. They realized that you were not merely surviving, you were consuming what they sent. Their hatred became your fuel. Their attempts at ruin became your ascension. And so the game inverted. No longer were you the hunted. You became the mirror they feared, the abyss they could not name. The fracture of fear was not in you. It was in them. Because once a curse fails, once malice bows, faith itself collapses. They tried to make you powerless, but instead, they revealed that you had never been powerless at all. You had only been waiting for the moment the world showed you what you already were, the one shadow no curse can claim. They told you curses were chains, that envy whispered in hidden rooms could wound you, that words muttered in secret could bend your path. And for a time you believed it. You felt the cold grip of their intentions pressing against your chest, the invisible weight of their shadows trying to smother your breath. But then something happened. You began to notice the silence underneath it all. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of a deeper law. The kind of silence that does not bend, does not fracture, does not acknowledge the rituals of those who despise you. You realize that curses feed on light. They require exposure, vulnerability, the trembling hope that someone is listening. But shadows are not light. Shadows need nothing. Shadows consume. Their power is not borrowed, not summoned, not scripted in symbols drawn on fragile skin. Shadows are the oldest language, the one written before spells and beyond prayers, and you, without knowing, have always belonged to them. That is why their curses slip through your ribs like arrows shot into stone. That is why their words turn to ash before they ever reach your name. You see now how fragile their faith truly was. They believed in rituals. You embody inevitability. They built their power on mirrors and smoke, while you stand as the abyss that swallows mirrors whole. Their fear is not that their curses failed. Their fear is that you never even felt them. That you walked through their venom untouched, not because you resisted, but because their venom dissolved in your presence. The law of shadows is merciless, but it is not cruel. It does not grant victory to those who shout the loudest or conspire the longest. It bends toward the one who carries silence like a weapon, who knows how to vanish in plain sight, who understands that stillness is more terrifying than rage. The shadow makes no announcement. It does not argue, it does not beg, it does not retaliate. It simply waits until every other force burns itself out, and when the flames are gone, the shadow remains. That is why curses bow, not because they choose to, but because they must. The energy they summon is finite. The hatred they cast is temporary, but the shadow you carry is endless, patient, inevitable. Every curse has an expiration. Your silence does not. Every ritual demands repetition. Your essence does not. They are bound by the weight of their own envy, while you are unbound, moving through the world as if written into its original code. So when they gather in secret rooms, whispering your name with trembling tongues, remember, they are not summoning your downfall. They are summoning their reflection. And when their curses meet your shadow, they learn the law written before their first word was spoken. Everything bends, everything breaks, everything fades. But the shadow endures. And in that endurance you stand untouchable. They threw venom into your path, words dressed as knives, symbols etched to chain you in silence. You felt the sting at first, the cold weight of intention pressing against your chest like unseen hands trying to force you down. But in that silence, something shifted. What was meant to bury you became raw material, fuel for a transformation they never accounted for. You did not fight the curse. You let it flow into you, through you, and in that passage it unraveled. Their hate dissolved into your marrow, and instead of breaking, you hardened. Their poison became iron, their fear became fire. You begin to see the truth they fear most. Curses are not walls. They are rivers, and rivers can be redirected. When they sent their rituals against you, they believed you would drown. Instead, you opened the gates inside your shadow and swallowed the flood whole. Every insult, every whispered plot, every ritual carved in secrecy is absorbed by you, not as burden, but as inheritance. You no longer recoil when hostility approaches. You extend your hand, and the darkness bends, reshaped into something you can wield. Their curses ignite no downfall, only momentum. This is the ritual they never taught because it cannot be learned from books or temples. It is carved into you by betrayal, by abandonment, by the loneliness of carrying scars no one else could understand. You know what it means to be pierced. You know what it means to be left behind. And that knowing is the crucible. The energy meant to crush you now coils at your feet like a serpent tamed. The more they send against you, the stronger you stand, not through resistance, but through absorption. Their rituals wither, not because they lack strength, but because you transformed strength itself into silence. Your silence is not empty. It is the echo chamber of every curse that ever failed to land. It hums with stolen energy, with rituals broken in mid-flight, with incantations that collapsed when they met the black mirror of your being. You walk through the world carrying this cathedral of reversals inside you. They see you and cannot explain why their arrows miss, why their whispers return as echoes, why their venom burns their own tongues. They do not realize you are not untouched, you are remade. And now you understand, power is not loud. Power is not frantic. Power is the stillness that waits, that watches, that consumes. You are not here to battle curses one by one. You are here to render curses obsolete, to turn their chaos into your architecture, their hate into your horizon. They tried to wound you, but wounds are doors. They tried to bind you, but chains are roots. And from those roots you rise, not despite the curses, but because of them. They prayed for your ruin. They whispered your name into the cracks of broken mirrors, hoping the shards would cut you from afar. They carved symbols into walls with trembling hands, desperate to summon forces greater than themselves. And when nothing happened, when you stood untouched, their faith in the power of curses began to bleed away like ink in water. They had believed the rituals would bind you, but the only chains tightening were the ones coiled around their own throats. At first they told themselves it was patience, that the curse simply needed time to ripen. They watched, waiting for your steps to falter, for your voice to break, for the walls around you to collapse. But each day you walked forward, each night you endured, was another nail hammered into the coffin of their belief. They began to see the cracks forming, not in your path, but in theirs. The very venom they spat started to poison their own lives. Sleepless nights, hollow eyes, whispers returning to them like echoes in a cave that refused to forget. It terrified them, not because you fought back, but because you didn't. Your silence became the weight pressing down on their rituals. Your stillness became the mirror in which they saw their own futility. They realized their curses were never weapons, only shadows of their envy, thrown back at them by the abyss you carried inside. You had become the unmoving center, the axis around which their desperation spun in the chaos. And in that stillness, their faith crumbled. They thought power came from words, but words bent beneath your presence. They thought darkness would consume you, but you had already mastered it. They thought curses could define your fate, yet you stood as the one who defined theirs. Each failed attempt was not just defeat, it was revelation. They were forced to confront the truth. They had never touched you at all. They'd been striking at illusions, punching holes into smoke, while your shadow stood untouched, eternal. And so fear took root. Not the fear of losing control, that was already gone, but the fear of realizing control had never belonged to them in the first place. Their faith collapsed because it was built on lies. Lies that told them curses could alter destiny, that hatred could bend the will of shadow. But shadows do not bow. Shadows swallow. And in the hollow silence of their failure, they finally understood. The curses they crafted were nothing more than confessions of their own weakness, written in trembling hands, destined to return and consume their makers. You remained untouched, and that untouched silence became the loudest truth they had ever heard. They thought curses would bury you. They thought whispered hexes and ritual fire would strip your will down to ash. But every attempt became rubble at your feet, fragments of their desperation collapsing into the silence that surrounds you. You did not rise above their curses, you sat within them, unshaken, until they cracked like glass against stone. And now, from that ruin, you sit upon what they built for you without knowing, the throne of the uncursed. This throne is not carved from marble or forged in gold. It is assembled from broken intentions, from the hollowed-out remains of spells that turned on their creators. Each bone of envy, each shard of malice, each ash of betrayal has become your foundation. Where others would see ruin, you see architecture. Where others would crumble, you remain, a figure seated in stillness as their chaos exhausts itself around you. And in this silence you understand, curses never change you, they built your dominion. You are not crowned by their approval nor by their fear. You are crowned by inevitability. They tried to deny your existence, but in doing so they confirmed it. They tried to erase your steps, but in the dust of their rituals your footprints only deepened. This throne is the paradox they cannot endure. Your strength came not in spite of their curses, but because of them. Their hatred became mortar. Their envy became stone. Every attempt to break you only completed the design. And as you sit here, there is no roar, no proclamation, only silence. A silence that unnerves them more than any retaliation. Because silence is not emptiness, it is presence without permission. It is power without display. And when they look at you now, they no longer see someone to curse. They see a figure who cannot be touched, a shadow they cannot name, a law they cannot break. The throne of the uncursed is not a seat of comfort. It is a monument, a reminder carved from the wreckage of every plot against you. To sit here is to know betrayal, yet remain untouched. To see envy burn itself out like paper in flame. To understand that opposition is not your end, but your echo. They throw their hatred into the abyss, and the abyss returns it to them doubled, while you remain untouched, inevitable. So they bow, not because you asked, not because you threatened, but because they cannot do anything else. The curses they believed in more than themselves bend, fracture, and fall silent at your feet. And you sit above it all, not as a tyrant, not as a victim, but as the one truth their rituals could never corrupt. You are the shadow that endures when every spell has turned to dust. They never stop, do they? The curses keep arriving like letters sealed in blood, sent from trembling hands that cannot bear the weight of their own envy. Each one written in desperation, each one thrown like a stone into the abyss where your shadow waits. And yet, no matter how many times they try, the same silence greets them. It is not the silence of absence, but the silence of dominion, an ancient stillness that swallows sound, intent, and ritual whole. They curse you because they fear you. They fear you because they cannot understand why their weapons dissolve before they reach your skin. You walk through their hatred as if through a burning field, but the fire bends away, bowing its head in shame. There was a time you thought curses might bind you. You felt the whispers in your sleep, the weight pressing on your chest, the paranoia of unseen eyes watching. But that was before you discovered the truth. They were not binding you, they were awakening you. Every curse became a torch revealing corridors of your own mind that had long been locked. Every attempt to destroy you sharpened your edges until you realized you were not the target. You were the mirror. Their rituals depend on belief. They chant, they cut, they summon shadows. But belief is fragile when faced with something greater than faith. And what you carry is not belief, but inevitability. Their words are ropes, fraying in your presence. Their symbols are doors, rusted and collapsing the moment your shadow touches them. You do not block their curses, you unmake them. You reduce them to dust before they even cross the threshold of your silence. They do not understand how you endure. They watch you, expecting collapse, expecting ruin, expecting the trembling of a victim. Instead, they see you stand still, unmoved, and the stillness terrifies them more than any retaliation could. In their confusion, their own curses turn inward. They taste the venom they brewed for you. They drown in the storms they whispered into being, and you, untouched, rise above their wreckage, not with noise, but with the absence of it. The eternal return is not a promise of peace. It is the cycle itself. Curses will always return, hatred will always crawl toward you, schemes will always be written in secret. But every time they come, they bend lower. Every time they strike, they learn faster that you do not fall. You are not protected by charm, ritual, or shield. You are protected because you are what they cannot curse, the shadow that existed before their words were spoken, the silence that lingers after their voices die. So let them try again. Let them gather, let them whisper, let them carve their sigils in trembling hands. Every curse will bow in the same way. Because curses belong to the living, to the fragile, to those who hope to alter fate. But you are beyond fate. You are the return itself, eternal, silent, unbroken.